Murfreesboro Planning Commission meeting. Welcome everyone. We do have a quorum present tonight. Thanks everyone for being here. And we will start with the approval of the minutes of April 3rd, 2019, May 1st, 2019, and May 15th, 2019, Planning Commission minutes. Do we have anybody that would like to make any changes, additions, corrections to any of the minutes from those? Thank you. Any additions or corrections? And if not, we will approve the minutes as submitted. We do have one item of other business that we would like to go ahead with before we start into our agenda tonight. And Mr. Ives is going to take that over for us.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. Yes, we have asked to move this item of other business up to the front of the agenda to accommodate the schedule of our friend Mr. County Mayor Ketron, who is here with us tonight. If there are any questions about this item, he may be able to better answer them than I can. But the city now owns about 17 acres of land, 17.6. It's at the intersection of Fortress and Blaze. The city's had that for several years. Of course, it's adjacent to a portion of the Blackman schools that are at that area. There's been a variety of uses proposed for this area, and a couple of years ago we did construct a public safety communications tower on this land, and it's there in an operation at this time. We are also proposing to build a city fire station. It'll be Station 11 on a part of the western portion to the west of the driveway for that tower. And I don't have one to go on the overhead, but if you look at the attachment to what I had handed out before the meeting, there's a concept plan for this property that includes the fire station to the left of the roadway into the tower and some potential county offices on the right side. What the county clerk has been looking for land outside the downtown area and they've been, I think, looking at this and considering this for some time, as has the Department of Motor Vehicles been looking at a driver's license station to be remote from the one they have now. Our mayors and senior staff have gotten together over the last months and discussed this, and we're bringing this to the Planning Commission as a mandatory referral with regard to the use of the land. And the use that we're proposing is to enter into a lease with the county. The terms of that still, of course, to be determined, as well as the precise acreage to be determined. But it would be a lease where a ground lease, and the county would then build a building that would house both a county clerk's office, and then they would sublease some space to the Department of Motor Vehicles. So we are working on a memorandum of understanding that I think is close to being ready to be presented to council. But as a mandatory referral, after that MOU is entered into, we will then get down to negotiating the terms of the land lease. But it's coming to you as a mandatory referral with regard to the use of the land, that being the proposal to lease this land to the county for a long period of time. It would probably be at least a 50-year lease, and with a renewal of like terms, because this is anticipated that this would be essentially a permanent usage of this land. So with that, I will try to answer any questions, or if you have any other questions, Mayor Ketron may be able to help us out with this.
Any questions from the Planning Commission?
There's no questions. I'll make a motion. We approve. I'll second.
Motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here, Mayor Ketron. All right. So then we will move on to old business. The first item we have for old business is an annexation plan of services and annexation petition for approximately 3.1 acres located along Shelbyville Pike. Douglas Dales is the applicant. Ms. Kerr.
Thank you, Chairman Jones and Planning Commission. Last month, on May 1st, Planning Commission conducted a public hearing for this property, which consists of a single parcel located on Shelbyville Pike, north of Volunteer Road. The parcel is approximately 3 acres and contains a single-family home and several accessory structures. After the public hearing, the annexation was deferred due to fire department issues with fire protection. Since that time, the Murfreesboro Fire and Rescue Department has confirmed in a letter to staff that they would provide emergency services at the time of annexation to the property, and at the time of redevelopment, additional fire protection may be required. That letter from the Murfreesboro Fire Department is located in your agenda information. Also, the tax rate sheet that I included in the plan of services is an incorrect tax rate. I have given you all a corrected sheet of that, and the corrected sheet will be in the plan of services prior to going to City Council. The Planning Commission will need to discuss this matter and formulate a recommendation for City Council.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Kerr. Do we have any further discussion on this item? After we had our public hearing, and so we were just waiting on those items to be confirmed. Any other discussion?
If there are no other questions, I'll make a motion for approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Moving on to item B, we have the zoning application for approximately 3.1 acres located along Shelbyville Pike to be zoned commercial highway simultaneous with annexation. Five Star Joint Venture is the applicant. Ms. Kerr.
Thank you. This item is the rezoning request of the previous annexation request. The applicant has requested a zoning classification of commercial highway simultaneously with the annexation. At the May 1st meeting, of course, it was deferred due to the fire protection issues for the annexation. The Murfreesboro Fire and Rescue Department has confirmed it does not object to the annexation or the rezoning, and the Planning Commission needs to discuss this matter and formulate a recommendation to City Council.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Kerr. Any Planning Commission members have any further comments regarding the zoning on this item? Ready for a motion?
Chair Jones, I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion to approve in a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you very much. Moving on to our public hearings. The first item we have tonight is a zoning application for approximately 20.06 acres located east of New Salem Highway and south of Middle Tennessee Boulevard to be rezoned from heavy industrial to light industrial. Newton and James Malloy families applicant. And Ms. Kerr.
Thank you. The subject property is approximately 20 acres located east of New Salem Highway and south of Middle Tennessee Boulevard and west of Old Salem Road. The property is mostly undeveloped but does contain 2 residences and multi-accessory structures. This property is currently zoned heavy industrial, and the owner has requested a light industrial zoning. So this is actually a decrease in the zoning for this property. The rezoning is speculative, but possible allowable uses considered by the applicant are a car dealership, fast food restaurant, hotels, convenience stores, and offices. The adjacent properties to the north, south, east, and west of the property are zoned heavy industrial. Surrounding properties are developed with a variety of commercial industrial uses, along with several scattered single-family dwellings. Properties located to the west of the New Salem Highway from the property include Heritage Farm Dairy and a vacant parcel of land bordering Interstate I-24 and New Salem Highway. Further south of the subject property is the New Salem Highway Interstate Interchange I-24. Future land use map of Murfreesboro 2035 Comprehensive Plan recommends urban commercial mixed use and is most appropriate land use character for the subject property as shown on the map included in your agenda. The characteristics of urban commercial mixed use will be consistent with the proposed changes to the 2035 Comprehensive Plan that planning staff will be presenting in the coming months. The Planning Commission will need to conduct a public hearing, after which it will need to discuss this matter and formulate a recommendation for City Council.
Okay. Any comments or questions before we open the public hearing? Okay, before we open the public hearing tonight, just make a few comments about the public hearing process. We will invite you to come to the podium. You will state your name and your address, and you will make all of your comments to the Planning Commission and not to other members of the audience or the developers or anyone else in attendance. We will take note of all of your questions that you have, and at the end of the public hearings, we will answer those questions either by staff or possibly the developers or presenters, and try to answer any of the questions that come up during the public hearing process. We ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes or less, because we do have several people here that looks like would not like to speak tonight. So we will begin this public hearing and ask anyone to come forward that would like to speak on this zoning application. All right. We'll close that public hearing and ask for comments, questions, and/or a motion from the Planning Commission.
Chairman Jones, this looks to be what I'd call a down sizing of zones, since we're going from H1 to LI, or HI to LI. So I'll make a motion we approve, subject to all staff comments.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. All right, item B is a zoning application for approximately 13.04 acres located along New Salem Highway to be rezoned from OG and RM16 to RSA Type 2, and approximately 1.95 acres to be rezoned from RS15 to RS6. Tim McClure is the applicant. Ms. Kerr.
Thank you. This property is located along the southeast side of New Salem Highway, west of Veterans Parkway. The total area is approximately 15 acres in size. The parcel itself is zoned Highway Commercial District and General Office District, Multifamily Residential District 16, and Single Family Residential District 15. The applicant is requesting to rezone to RSA Type 2 and RS6. A breakdown of the acreage is included in your agenda packet. This area is part of a rezone request that passed second and final reading at City Council on May 16th. The rezoning request is to address the location of wetlands on this property. There will be no increase in the number of units that they will develop. As previously mentioned, the subject parcel is currently zoned Commercial Highway, Office General, Residential Multifamily 16, and Residential Single Family 15. On the north side of New Salem Highway, the zoning is Commercial Highway, Commercial Fringe, and RS 15. And the land uses are primarily vacant and agricultural. Also, in the unincorporated area surrounding this property, there are single-family residential subdivisions, the Clear Ridge to the southwest and the Blue Ribbon Estates to the northwest across New Salem Highway. The Murfreesboro 2035 Comprehensive Plan recommends that general commercial and suburban residential are the most appropriate land use characters for the subject property, as shown on the map in your agenda. And the characteristics of general commercial and suburban residential will be consistent with the proposed changes to the 2035 Comprehensive Plan that the planning staff will present in the coming months. The Planning Commission needs to conduct a public hearing, after which it will need to discuss this matter and formulate a recommendation to City Council.
Okay. Any questions before we open the public hearing? Okay, we'll open the public hearing and ask anybody to come forward that would like to speak on this item. Okay. I know it's not going to be this easy all night, so we'll close that public hearing so we can keep moving. So comments, questions, and/or a motion from the Planning Commission?
Amelia, can you remind us what that sliver, what's the reason for that change? Or does it look like much of a piece of property to be rezoning?
Good evening. Rob Mulchin, SEC. The sliver in the bottom portion there that's being proposed for RS6 was due to a discrepancy between the GIS boundary and the actual boundary of the property after a survey was conducted. So that's the difference you can see between where the GIS line was in regards to when we did the initial zoning on this property to where we actually have a survey boundary on that. So that triangular sliver is the difference between what was based on deeds versus actually what was surveyed on the ground based on pins and records.
So are you saying that that whole piece of property that's in looks like Idaho is RS15 now, or there's portions of it that are zoned something other than RS15?
Mr. Halliburton, just to, if I could just interject real quick, the map that you have in front of you, the previous zoning request is so new, so fresh, that this map has not been updated yet, so it does not reflect the large RS6 zoning that was approved by City Council last month, and I think that just became effective on May 31st, I think. So we would make sure to get the map updated prior to City Council, but that little sliver is really, Mr. Mulchan's right, it's to clean up some boundary discrepancies that occurred, and the RS6 zoning is consistent with the larger rezoning that was approved by council last month.
Okay, that makes more sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Halliburton. Any other questions?
If there's no other questions, I'll move for approval, subject to staff comments.
Second.
Motion and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Okay, moving on, item C is an annexation petition and plan of services for approximately 85 acres located along Lee Lane. James and Virginia Jernigan are the applicants. Ms. Green.
Good evening. Thank you, Ms. Jones and Planning Commission members. I present to you tonight an annexation petition and a plan of services prepared for property that's located along the north side of Lee Lane. This property was requested to be annexed by the current owners, who are listed as James and Virginia Jernigan. They currently own the property, but they do have a contract for someone else to purchase it, and that person will be the applicant for the next item, but this is by the property owners. This property is 85 acres, and the study does include approximately 655 linear feet of Lee Lane right-of-way. Lee Lane is a substandard county road, and a portion of Lee Lane was recommended to be annexed with previous actions, although those still are not in the city. You can see on the map the northern boundary is currently in city limits, and that property is contiguous with the property. What you can't see on the map, because the City Council has not yet approved the annexation request, is that there's been a study and a request for the property that looks like an upside-down L to the east or on the left side of the parcel to annex that property into the city as well. This plan of services only considers the parcel identified in purple on the map for you, and it does include, of course, that right-of-way, as I mentioned. The property is primarily undeveloped. It's used for agricultural purposes, but there aren't really any structures on the property. I provided you a plan of services outlining the services the city can provide and committing a time frame to providing those services. It's vacant land, so there will be very few services that we need to extend to the property immediately upon annexation. Future development, of course, would require to be built according to city standards, and they would have to, whatever type of development comes in the future, meet our electric, water, sewer, streets, and roadway standards. I do have the plan of services. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them. This property is contiguous with current city limits, and it's within the urban growth boundary. You should conduct a public hearing prior to making your recommendation regarding the annexation. I will note, because I suspect some of the people in the audience are interested in speaking about this property, this public hearing is for the annexation only. After we close this public hearing, there'll be a second public hearing, and I'll do another presentation, just like what I'm doing now, about the zoning change. So whichever you're interested in speaking for, of course, you're welcome, but this is just for the annexation. And then we will follow this with another public hearing that will be for the zoning change request.
Thank you, Ms. Green.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments from the Planning Commission before we open the public hearing? Okay, here we go. We'll open this public hearing and see if anybody would like to come forward to speak on this item, the annexation request.
My name is Charles Blevins. I live on Tulip Hill Drive. Our largest concern is traffic. Right now, we have been, because of the new interchange at I-24 and Joe B. Jackson, we have been inundated with heavy traffic along Elam Road. We live in a subdivision right back there. I mean, we're overwhelmed now. It cannot handle heavier traffic. It can't handle the heavy traffic it gets now. And with more commercialization, what are we going to do? That's really, that's my biggest concern. I mean, we do back up. I know we can hear the Butler Road industry over there from our neighborhood. That's okay, we can live with it, but traffic is a huge concern.
Thank you, Mr. Blevins.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Bruce White. I live at 1819 Lee Lane, the property adjacent to this property. I want to speak against the annexation simply because I understand that with the approval of the annexation, then the HI is coming in. So I just want to go on the record as I'm against it. And there's a lot of reasons that people don't want it being HI, but the reason that I'm going to speak against it tonight is because of if it gets annexed, then the next step is the HI. So I just want to go on record as being against it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. White.
My name's Mike Knowles. I live 359 Pleasant Run Road, Smyrna. I just see this as the annexation as the only way to get H1. And the people in that area don't want H1. It's pure and simple. And the county does have, and the people in the county do have the right to ask their neighbors and to at least confront their neighbors on what they're going to use their land for. We've done it before. Shelton Farms wanted to be a Shelton Bible theme park at one point. That was stopped. The people in the county can stop things against what the Planning Commission wants or whatever the developers want. So that's what this planning meeting is for people like these guys here, myself, and I apologize for addressing someone else. But, you know, again, the issue is that you annex this and it is going to become something else. And that's the only reason why it's being annexed. There's no other reason to annex this property other than to make it H1. And that's a fact.
Thank you, Mr. Knowles.
I guess while we're stating facts, the Bible Park was a county project. That was not a city project, and it came before the county commission. It did not come before the... Right. But the annexation of that property or the development of that property had nothing to do with the city of Murfreesboro.
My name is Eric Plow, and I live at 2232 Elam Road. I live in the neighborhood that is directly behind this piece of property. Basically, I'm only here as another number, another person, and I would like to basically just echo what my neighbors have said. Annexation virtually assures the heavy industrial designation of this property. We simply don't want it.
Thank you, Mr. Plow.
Good evening. My name is Mary Brashler, and I live at 1830 Lee Lane, adjacent from the property being discussed to be annexed into the city. I've lived there 24 years. I love living in the county. I love that neighborhood, and I'm asking you not to annex that into the city so that our neighborhood will also not be annexed into the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rashler.
I have a question first. Are we allowed to speak at both public hearings?
Yes.
Okay.
Just-
My name is Diane Parker,
Okay.
and I'm at 2101 Wimbledon Drive. I'm off of Elam Road. My property abuts the original annexation back done in March, the 233 acres that was zoned and annexed. And I have 3 questions, and I'd like for you to answer them at the end of this meeting. The first one is, why did you all, the Planning Commission, go against your expert advice and zone this heavy industrial when your staff, and that would be Donald Anthony and Matthew Bromley, requested and recommended that this whole acreage, and I'm talking the 233 acres as well as this 85 acres, they requested it to be a planned industrial development and did not approve this heavy industrial zoning. So I'm asking, why was that approved by the planning staff unanimously? My second question is, we obviously are a neighborhood of residents. This is going to heavily impact our residents. Why did the developer not give us the courtesy of holding a community meeting to let us know of the major impact that was getting ready to happen in our neighborhood? We had 15 days from the date that I got a letter, and I got a letter only because my property abuts to that original annexation request of 233 acres. There was 6 or 7 other property owners out of over 100 that got the letter. We had 15 days to get the word out, so to speak, to talk to our neighbors, to organize. That first public hearing in March was not well attended because of that. At the city council meeting, it was better attended because we had a chance to get the word out. So this is a heavy impact. This is a big deal. Why were we not given the opportunity, like Zazarus, the one that's putting in the distillery? Why was the community hearing not held for us? Just a question. And the third question is, why the rush? Why is this being pushed through so fast? At the public hearing in March, it was told that this is an opportunity to bring in great paying jobs, a great boost for the city. We have to act on this fast. Why? That's my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Parker. Anybody else for this hearing?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Christopher Brown, 2004 Crossfield Drive. I echo the sentiments and statements of the previous public speakers, and I would like to add that with this annexation and the extreme possibility of this becoming a heavy industrialized zone, not only do traffic concerns come into does increased traffic come into being a major concern with this, but there are other factors as well, including noise, of which the city does have several ordinances against. And even with the even with the possibility of a buffer area of 50 feet or possibly more. With something like this, honestly, where we live, I can hear some of the other industry much further down on Rutherford Boulevard at night, and certainly can hear trains. So noise is an issue, traffic is an issue. Without question, there would be a constant influx of materials going in and out of this particular site. The Lee Lane extension in particular would create absolute havoc on our side of the road. Not to mention the fact that Elam would need to be expanded and cannot handle truck traffic as it stands right now. So, in closing, I would simply like to say that the annexation of this would most definitely lead to heavy industrial zoning and would have a gross impact in a negative way on the quality of life of the residents who live there, currently myself included, and some who have lived there far longer. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Anybody else?
I want to clarify one thing for sure. I'm not the only owner of this property. I am...
And so, do you mind, for the record, just go ahead and state your name and address? Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm James Jernigan.
Yes, sir.
Lived on 212 2nd Avenue, no, 214 now. But I lived on 212 before that. From the time I was 7 years old till my wife and I married, we moved the next house, which was convenient for us because I could look after my parents. But we are not, I'm not the sole owner of this property. And there are 3 more heirs to this property besides me. So I get a little tired of making the news like I'm the only one. It looks like I'm going to get the switching for everything. But I've been we have the 85 acres, and I've been approached that they would buy this land. And I think we're getting a sort of a misconception here. That most of the traffic that comes out there does not come out Lee Lane. It comes out Elam Road 1. Now, there's 2 Elam Roads. There's a Elam Road 2 and an Elam Road 1. And the Elam Road I'm talking about is the one where most of the traffic is coming out because you got Amazon employees coming out at a certain time. You've got other traffics that are coming out there. Sometimes when I'm coming out at certain times of the day, I just turn around and go back the other way or go down Manchester Pike and come through and get home. So the Elam Road traffic is not the problem. Pardon?
Not a conversation, please.
I'm sorry, but I've been out there longer than anybody here. We got that land in the early 40s, when the road went all the way through to the Shelbyville Highway. It no longer does that. So we come there every day to feed cattle. And the main problem is Elam Road. You can't get out Elam Road to the Manchester Pike because you've got industry out there for sure. And I think this man right here will agree with me. He says I'm the only one that ever thought that he did a good job. But anyway, we have been there when that was a gravel road. When the water used to get up on both ends and you couldn't even get out either way. You couldn't get out on 231, couldn't get out 41. So that was a tremendous problem for us back in that day. And it's always been agriculture. We've had as high as 300 head of hogs out in that area. And we got cattle now. Cattle's not making any money. And we may have to go back to the hog situation. But anyway, I just appreciate the gentleman that has tried to acquire this land for the benefit of workers in Rutherford County. And I don't want to offend any of the neighbors, and that's not my goal. But my family, you see, since I'm not the only heirs, I've got 3 first cousins that is heirs to this property. And they obviously want to get out of it. I can't blame them. When they asked me what I thought about it, I said, well, it's going to have to be done one of these days. And so as far as I'm concerned, might as well do it now and get it over with. I don't want to pass this problem on to my children, and they don't want to pass it to theirs. Anyway, I appreciate you listening.
Thank you, Mr. Jernigan. We appreciate it. Thank you. No, sir. Next hearing.
Good evening. My name is Melinda Brown. I live at 2004 Crossfield Drive. I'm in this community right on the corner of Tulip Hill and Crossfield Drive. I'm also a local attorney here in town. I've been an attorney practicing for 9 years. We all live here. We all spend our money here. We all pay our taxes. Most of us are not in the city limits, but we do pay our taxes, and we do contribute to this community. So we certainly want our voices to be heard. We want people to understand what our concerns are. And with all due respect to Mr. Jernigan, I've helped many families who've been in similar situations who need to sell property. There are other ways to do it. If we are annexing this property, what is going to happen with it? Is it going to stay in the city and be agricultural? Not likely. That is our greatest concern, because what is the point of annexing if it's going to remain something cohesive with the rest of the neighborhood? Not much. The only other options that you can have for this property, aside from, of course, the industrial that's being proposed, is, you know, some type of residential or other development, which certainly we wouldn't discourage something of that nature, but you are putting excessive pressure on the extremely limited resources that are within this community. Our roads are extremely small, very narrow, very substandard. We have next to no street lighting. I mean, our whole community is very rural in nature because we've been in the county. We've been happily in the county. We love being here. But we do not have the resources in our area for any type of large development with a lot of new traffic, even if it was just residential, not necessarily the extreme industrial type of traffic that's being proposed. Any type of thoroughfare that would be carved out of this property and extend over to Rutherford is going to create even more havoc with people trying to cut through. Elam Road is a very, very, very busy road. Trying to get out on Manchester Highway, I don't even go to work unless I go at 7:30 in the morning, and I have more than 20 minutes to get 4 miles to my office, because you cannot turn on that road unless somebody coming from Manchester is super, super nice and willing to let you out, because you're not going to get out otherwise. We sit there for 20 or 30 minutes every single day. And in the afternoons, it's just as bad. Every shift at Amazon that gets off or goes on, we know it because we see it every day. If we add to that any type of major development that would be coming along with annexation, I don't care what type of, we're not even talking about the zoning, I'm just talking about any type of development, we are going to have severe strain on our resources. And with the rest of us not being in the county, who's going to pay for it? Is our big question. Because the city is certainly not going to want to pay to expand and widen a bunch of county roads in order for that to accommodate us. So it's going to fall on the county. Well, the county certainly doesn't want to deal with excessive pressures that are put on by city development. So we're going to sit here in the middle for another 5 or 10 years while people are trying to figure it out. Or we're going to have to be annexed in order to get the city to help us with anything whatsoever as far as roads go. So we do have a number of concerns with the zoning, which I'll reserve those comments for later, but certainly with any type of annexation, we are talking about development, and we certainly understand that development is a good thing, it is necessary, but in this environment, in this situation, it's going to come with a number of very, very serious pressures that right now there is no plan for. We don't have any way that the city or the county is going to be dealing with this. So
Okay.
we're sitting here
Thank you, Ms.
wondering what to do.
Thank you so much. Anybody else on the annexation?
Good evening. My name is Joanne Plow. I live at 2232 Elam Road. First, I want to apologize to you, sir. I'm sorry. I should have kept quiet. The annexation is being done for a reason. I have been told, I have spoken to every member on the city council, except one. We are in fear. There are more than 40 homes within this neighborhood. As someone had said to me, it's only 40 homes. We don't actually have a right, basically, to an opinion. This is for the benefit of the city. These are our homes. There are over 100 homes in that area. You annex it, city, it benefits the city, absolutely. You get city taxes, county taxes, I understand. But it's a county neighborhood. I live on Elam Road, literally at both ends, between Joe B. Jackson and Manchester Highway. It is a nightmare. I have spoken before planning boards. I have spoken between the city council. The city says they can't put a light at the end of Elam Road and Manchester. The county says, well, they can't. They're going back and forth and back, and this is going on for years. It's absurd. With all due respect to the gentleman who spoke before, I don't want to say his name wrong, so I'm not going to say it. Elam Road is horrible. You keep adding and adding and adding, and you're not fixing. Where's a plan for traffic? Annex this. The gentleman who is purchasing it will now acquire over 300 acres that he wants zoned heavy industrial, backing up against a neighborhood. Who cares about us? These are our homes. I've also, along the way, have heard comments, well, it's a very older neighborhood. There are older people there. So are you planning on them dying off and just taking the whole thing. The fear that you want to take over our homes, annex it all, turn it into an industrial park. We're not all, older people. There are a lot of young people that live in that neighborhood. When is someone actually going to care about us, our homes, our property value, the traffic, and the mission statement put in your own paperwork on how you're supposed to care about the citizens of Murfreesboro? Please think of everything that everyone's saying. I beg of you, these are our homes. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Plow. Anyone else to speak on the annexation request?
Well, hello, Madam Forum and Committee. I'm Julie Jernigan Ludwig. I am one of the distant heirs of the Jernigan family, and I would like to state again that indeed my father is not the sole heir of this property. There are other heirs involved. We have been approached as a family multiple times regarding this plot of land and if we would like to sell it. Over the years, we have declined to do so as it has been an agricultural property in which we have run cattle off of. However, at this time, we reserve the right. We empathize with the community. I mean, I go down New Salem Pike every day to get home. We empathize with the congestion. However, we deserve the right to sell and to decide what to do with our land. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Anyone else? Close the public hearing on the annexation request. And Ms. Green.
I did hear several questions, some of which are relating to the zoning, which of course we'll discuss with the next item and not with the annexation. There were a couple questions, though, I thought were in regards to the annexation. One is that it certainly could be annexed, and if there was no companion zoning change application, it would come into the city with the zoning of RS-15, that single-family residential district. However, the owners will probably request to not be annexed if a zoning change doesn't happen. What the city will not do is annex those subdivisions. People mentioned that we would annex their properties, and we would not do that without a petition for annexation from those property owners. So the city would not go in and annex the privately owned parcels unless they submitted a petition like the Jernigan family submitted to us requesting that annexation. So that's not something that we would initiate. In years past, that was something we had the ability to do and did, but with current laws as they are, we will not do that. Let's see if I can find anything else. We did, with the notification, we did put something in the paper. We did mail outs for folks who live within 250 feet and signs on the property, which 15 days is the standard. I'm not sure about any other timeframes. I haven't been given any specification or any details about any proposed development here. So I don't know. I know that we have an application to talk about the zoning on the next agenda item. There are plans on our major transportation plan that was adopted by City Council Planning Commission to improve Elam Road to a 3-lane street. And there's a future cross connector from Rutherford to Manchester Highway, which would intersect Elam as well. So we do have plans for that. Funding, of course, is where the City Council comes in and they prioritize the roads throughout the entire city and even some that are outside the city that need to be constructed. But that is something that's identified as an improvement. The city sees it as an improvement and it's on our major transportation plan. I'm not sure that there were many more annexation questions. If I missed any.
Question about a community meeting. What's the decision factor on when we have a community meeting?
Sazerac did hold a neighborhood meeting. In that instance, there was a specific user with a planned industrial district plan, so a PID, and they held a neighborhood meeting wanting to get specific feedback about their proposed plan that they were proposing. This would of course, is a speculative zoning. They anticipate the proposed use, but they don't have somebody that they're saying, like, there's a distillery going here. They don't, that's not the instance here. This is something that is anticipated, but we don't have anybody like Sazerac approaching the city and saying they want to develop here.
And is this application being rushed or pushed through faster than a standard application that we receive?
No, ma'am, this is, we have very formalized submittal process. We have days that applications can be submitted, and we have notification processes, and this meets all those standards and processes that the city council adopted for us. So it's not, there is also another public hearing, of course. There's tonight's public hearing, and then in a couple months, there'll be one at the city council where people have the ability to speak there, so that will give them even more time and another opportunity to have a public meeting, to speak in a public meeting.
Planning Commission, you have further questions?
First of all, Mr. Jernigan, you are one of the few people that say I do a good job, and I appreciate that. And I hope I don't disappoint you tonight, but I might. When we look at the development of the roadway out there, traditionally the city has not created what we refer to as spider legs, where we would go out and just annex a roadway for the sake of annexing a roadway with the county on both sides of it. However, we have recently changed our approach on that because we understand that getting on Elam Road is easy. Getting off Elam Road is almost impossible. So I came out and I sat in your neighborhood the other day and sat in front of Miss Nunley's house and listened to the traffic on the interstate and listened to the production of the facilities across the street over there across the interstate. And so I understand what you're talking about. You're concerned for the sound and the noise and the change period, because there's always a resistance to change. But we are trying to address the roadway issue. And Mr. Huddleston, would you please give us an update as to where we are on any potential plans for that area?
Good evening, Mr. Smotherman, members of the Planning Commission, Sam Huddleston, Development Services. I think Margaret Ann done a pretty good job introducing the major thoroughfare plan, which was the very broad plan for improvements in this area. We certainly have planned for those. I think you're also aware of some recent annexations we did. And maybe I would couch this by saying that Elam Road itself is not the problem. Elam Road's connection to Broad Street and Elam Road's connection to Joe B. Jackson, that's where the conflict is. And what we heard in testimony at this public hearing was, in fact, confirmed that for us. So our attention probably short-term needs to be on those two areas. There was a statement made about signalization. Why don't we signalize them? And unfortunately, both of those locations are very, they don't meet our standards for signal spacing. So what I would say to this group is the road network that we need out there and the improvements we need help provide additional capacity for ins and outs into the Elam Road area or into this enclave of developments and neighborhoods between Joe B. Jackson and Manchester Pike and Rutherford Boulevard. Right now, there's really only one way in and out on the north end, and there's one way in and out on the south end. So developing that full roadway network would be important to us. And I think Elam Road at Joe B. Jackson could benefit from some plans that we have with TDOT to improve access at the interstate. We anticipate that to include signalization as well. But that's a TDOT-led project. I would also submit to you that Elam Road at Manchester Highway could benefit from improvements at Rutherford Boulevard and Manchester Highway. And those are also projects that we're pursuing. I don't have specific dates on them at this point, but we are not turning our back on that issue, but we are pursuing those projects with TDOT and with city staff. Hopefully that answers your question on that matter.
But ultimately, in the 2040 roadway plan, we've actually planned to have roadways in place that would relieve these problems. Even though they're not in the city, we intend to resolve those issues with that Elam Road coming onto Manchester Highway problem.
Yes. Yes, and the initial study of the major transportation plan identified the needs. It identified what the testimony tells us, right? We've heard the stories, we've heard the testimony here at public hearings for several years now about those difficulties. The study part of the transportation plan confirmed that for us, and I think you've heard us talk about the level of service of C and D and E, and certainly there are a couple of those intersections that are failing now. So that demonstrated the need. The plan that we've devised demonstrates the help, the remedy to the need, the improvements to the area, and so getting some additional roadway connections in there and some additional capacity, some of the things that this body advocates for as we review development plans is going to be critical to us to serve that very large area between Manchester Highway and I-24, Rutherford Boulevard, and Joe B. Jackson. There's a lot of undeveloped lands in there. I think the two properties that we're looking at for this property and the companion annexation that went through a few weeks back is approaching 400 acres that is currently undeveloped. Any development on that property is going to trigger some needs, some additional attention to traffic.
And I guess just to follow up on that, I appreciate everybody who has contacted me so far about this. I've talked to some of you for moments, and I've talked to some of you for hours. And the conversation has been cordial, and you've been very polite about it. I understand your concerns. We absolutely agree that it's changed. There's no doubt it's changed from compared to what you're used to. But there are such things as property rights, and the people have the right to develop their property or sell their property and do as they wish. State law does prohibit us from having forced annexation, though. So anybody who tells you that you will be forced into the city of Murfreesboro, that is absolutely not true. And I know that has been rumored in your community, and there's no intentions or no desire even to provide you with the services of Murfreesboro, because what you would pay in property tax would never pay back what it would cost to bring you up to city standards. And so it's not advantageous to the city to annex you, so there's really not a desire. But I don't want anybody to leave here tonight believing that this is just one step closer to their doorstep, and that there's a greater plan to take your property. There's not.
Mr. Huddleston, I had one other question. The proposed improvement on the 2040 transportation plan shows this as midterm improvements. In your opinion, would the zoning change, I know we're talking about the annexation, but would heavy industrial use of this change that long-term forecast for that being a midterm use to a short-term use? I'm just thinking about it since we're talking about it.
Yes, and so, Mr. Martin, the question you're asking about is infrastructure now or development now or infrastructure before development. It's a pretty common theme, pretty common question for this body and for city staff. And the answer is that really they need to progress together. We really don't want to see development way outpace infrastructure, and we really can't afford as a community for infrastructure to way outpace development. And so the simple answer to your question is yes, as those properties are proposed for development. That also triggers city staff, it triggers the Plan Commission, it triggers the mayor and council to be ready to implement the plans that we have talked about. And a lot of times those plans are assisted by development intentions. And so it would be helpful. The 2040 major transportation plan and the predictions that we made there as far as general time frames were based on the look we had really almost 4 to 5 years ago now. The capital improvement plan, which we bring to the mayor and council annually, that document, that tool is our short-term planning document for these major capital improvements. And so that 5-year window is where we're really looking to say, yes, in 5 years, we want to be started on that project. In 4 years, we want to be started on that project. So certainly were there development to come about that were to impact this 85 acres in addition to the other developments, because it is quite honestly, at the end of the development track, so to speak. I think you'd hear from staff that we'd be recommending significant improvements in that area.
Thank you, sir.
I have one question for you also. So the 2040 plan does address Elam Road, and it does address some additional capacity coming through Tulip Lane, but it doesn't, I'm assuming it didn't anticipate this being developed and what the impact on Lee Road would be. So is there any changes to the plan that would affect Lee Road at all?
So Lee Lane?
Yep,
well,
Lee
so
Lane.
the major transportation plan, as the name implies, addresses our major routes. And so there's a certain level of roadway classification that we look at and say these roadways are collectors, our minor arterials and our major arterials, our freeways, our interchanges. Those are the classifications of roads that would address there. Even in a developed state, Lee would only qualify as a local road, and so the improvements to Lee Lane, if there were any ever, would be related to the development that's along it, rather than perhaps something that's initiated for a broader community need. Okay. The plans, the roadways that are in there are really addressing broad area-wide or community-wide transportation needs, and Lee is really only serving to get you from Elam Road back into the mass of the property.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Huddleston. I had one other item I was going to just briefly address in regards to one of Ms. Parker's questions. And I will not specifically address your question regarding why the Planning Commission would vote against what the staff recommends. I did not vote on that item that you're referring to, the 200-acre tract that was approved prior to that, so I can't speak in regards to that specifically. I abstained from that vote because of a potential conflict. But in general, as a Planning Commission, we rely very heavily on the information that the staff provides for us, always. We certainly couldn't do what we do up here without the enormous amount of work that the staff does for us before we get to this meeting. But obviously, if all we were going to do was put a rubber stamp on everything that they presented to us, I don't think that we would have this board up here. There wouldn't be any reason to have us. Everything would just go directly to City Council, would be my guess. So even though I would say the large majority of the time we agree and often approve things very much along the lines of what staff presents, we also have very often a lot of changes, or maybe we suggest different ways that we could do different things, and we do not always approve exactly everything as it's presented. I mean, we take it as that is part of our job, is to question the things that are presented to us, and to, if there are other ways that some things can be done, then maybe sometimes that might be the best way to do it. A lot of times, the questions that the public asks might be something I never even thought of before when you bring it up. So we very much pay attention to what the public presents during our public hearings. So I hope that answers the question just in general, because again, I don't want it to be specifically about that one prior event, because I wasn't voting on that one, so I can't say anything specifically regarding that. But I did want to explain my thoughts on that question. Any other questions? questions that we didn't address or anything else? Any other questions from the Planning Commission on the annexation?
I'll make a motion if there are no other questions to approve the annexation as presented.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so the annexation request does pass. So our next item will be the zoning application for approximately 85 acres located along Lee Lane to be zoned heavy industrial simultaneous with annexation. Brian Berryman is the applicant. Ms. Green.
Thank you again, Mrs. Jones and Planning Commission members. The next item is a companion item to the previous. As I mentioned, this is for the request to zone this property to HI, Heavy Industrial District, simultaneous with its annexation. Brian Berryman is the applicant for this rezoning application and has submitted this request for you to consider. The property, as we mentioned, is just north of Lee Lane, and it's south of property currently within the city limits. The property that it is contiguous with is currently zoned CH, Commercial Highway District, and that parcel has frontage along South Rutherford Boulevard. Mr. Berryman recently submitted an application for you to consider a zoning change request for the property to the north from CH to Heavy Industrial District, and also that sideways L-shaped parcel to the west to zone that property HI simultaneous with the annexation. The subject property is zoned RM, which is medium density residential in Rutherford County. It's used for agricultural purposes, but it is zoned for lots that are about 15,000 square feet or 20,000 square feet if they're on septic tank. And that is the entitlement it currently has. They're asking for you to change that entitlement and to zone the property to Heavy Industrial District. The Heavy Industrial District is intended to provide areas in which the principal uses are manufacturing, wholesaling, and warehousing, and which are accessible to major transportation routes. This property is identified on our future land use map, which of course is not a future zoning map, it's a future land use map that gives you a pattern for proposed future development. It does call this to be suburban residential character, and the suburban residential character is that typical exurban county development that you see generally with those 15 to 20,000 square foot lots. I have included the chart of uses permitted in my materials with you so that you can look at the uses that are permitted and look through those for heavy industrial use. Our heavy industrial zone is our most permissive industrial zone. You should conduct a public hearing prior to formulating a recommendation to City Council. This item will, planning staff will present this item to City Council after they schedule a public hearing with whatever recommendation you give us. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them either before or after the public hearing.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Green. Any questions before we open the public hearing? Do you have a presentation? Okay, Mr. Melchin.
Thank you, Madam. Good evening, Rob Mulchin, SCC. I got a slight presentation to give you tonight in regards to the annexation and zoning here. Let me pull up the presentation. I hand out this addendum. This is a piece of the presentation. It's actually a modification with the plans that are in your packet tonight. It's just a better graphical representation about some of the things we're discussing. Again, my name is Rob Mulchin, CC. I'm accompanied tonight by Mr. Jeff Reed, Mr. John Hardy, and our applicant, Mr. Brian Berryman. Mr. Berryman is looking at rezoning this property to heavy industrial to go along with the other portions of the land that are around this that has gone through this planning commission and also gone through the first reading of City Council. They're looking to add this 85 acres to the already 230 acres that was already approved through planning commission and the first reading with City Council on that side, to look at bringing forth a unified property for his couple businesses. He has 3 businesses or companies that he owns. He's got numerous over 700 different offices, or I shouldn't say offices, but locations around the country in regards to his businesses. And he's looking at trying to pull together all this property to create a unified campus, or more or less a corporate campus for his companies on that side, which will bring in a myriad of different types of jobs in regards to corporate office jobs, but also the industrial jobs and the office jobs that will go along with the overall business aspect of all of his businesses on that side. So I'll go through a couple real quick presentations here. Just existing conditions. You can see the property itself. The yellow area that's outlined is the previous area that was gone through first reading at City Council in regards to rezoning this to heavy industrial. The light blue area is the additional 85 acres, so you can see the overall size of the full campus if this moves forward with the additional 85 acres. The properties around it, you can see, are some of the different businesses or industries that are located around this property: Husky Truss, Westbrook Riches, General Mills, and Steel Technologies. So what you're looking at in regards to what what this rezoning is looking for is more or less the same type of businesses and industries that are already in this location around the area. Existing zoning, as we talked about, the light blue area that you see is still a portion of the CH with the RM zoning on that side, but it has gone through the first reading in regards to pulling this into a heavy industrial upon second reading with City Council on that side. We talked about in regards to the land use, current recommendations would be light industrial on the northern portion of this property, and also the suburban residential portion is in the purple area, where we're talking about tonight. What has really changed in regards to this was really the light industrial. For the industrial side of this was the access to a rail spur that was brought up during the last planning commission and the City Council, that the rail spur that CSX is willing to grant to this property and the adjacent property that we were talking about previously, to provide for industrial type uses in regards to material supply, deliveries, and such like that. Rail systems do not easily supply these rail spurs anymore, so this is definitely an opportunity that the landowners are looking at, wanting to make certain they can, gain that access in regards to these potential industrial type uses and this business that he's looking at trying to bring to Murfreesboro on that side. The proposed zoning plan, you can see the purple area is what we're speaking about tonight. That is the 85 acres of Mr. Jernigan's property. The blue and gold areas you see in the plan itself are the other areas that have already gone through the first reading with City Council on that side. So you can see how this is another contiguous piece to the overall property on that side. I think the important thing we want to talk about is what has transpired in regards to addressing the adjacent properties in regards to the residential properties to the east of the development on that side. As it went through the Planning Commission and City Council portions on the previous portions of this property, we did make the contingency that we would leave a swath of land that would be remained as RS zoning classification there. It was originally proposed to be 25. We've increased that to a 40-foot. And then behind that, we've added in a 20-foot type E landscape buffer on the property that would be rezoned to heavy industrial. So more or less, we're providing a 60-foot barrier or buffer between what would be the potential industrial zoning classification and the existing county residential subdivisions to the east of this development on that side. So it's a 60-foot buffer that reaches all the way around that eastern periphery, as you can see in the diagram there itself. We talked about some of the heavy industrial uses that we've talked about some of the things that we would want to restrict in our restrictive covenants in regards to this property on that side. As you can see outlined on in your packet, but also as well as what you have up here on that side. Mr. Jeff Reed has gone through and been providing our CCRs in regards to the covenants and such, and in regards to what we restrict on that side. So as you can see, we have some restricted uses via the plat. That would be material storage and distribution types of things, manufacturing of chemicals, and junkyards. Those would be some of the items we would not want to see based on the plat. But also more going further past that would be anything like adult entertainment, that kind of stuff on that side. Animal slaughtering, poultry stockyards, so radioactive material storage. So we're talking about very high-end, heavy industrial uses we would more or less not want to see on the property. We're going to be restricting those from the deeds in regards to the property allowable uses on that side. But those will be part of the covenants that will be approved. It will be part of the packet that goes to staff. Access, and we've talked about that tonight in regards to access. We see our one main access point will be on, of course, South Rutherford Boulevard. We anticipate looking at this as a campus, as we talked about being a unified campus. We look at the opportunity for probably one major spine road that would move through this property that would allow for access to the entire campus, whether that be the corporate offices or the smaller, manufacturing or industrial type portions of that, with one access point back out to Rutherford on that side. And as I talked about earlier, the access to the rail spur line. As you can see, that rail spur line as it comes down along the existing CSX railway that you see crossing from left to right on the bottom of the drawing there. They're looking at granting us a spur line that would reach more or less from the existing spur line that moves over towards the Trusk company over there, all the way down to the edge of I-24 heading towards the southeast on that side there. So that's the opportunity that we're trying to look at in regards to the industrial uses that we're looking at trying to propose for this property. I appreciate your time and consideration of this rezoning, and I'm here for any questions as well as Mr. Reed in regards to the uses that we're looking for and restrictions on in regards to the zoning. So, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Melchan. Any questions for Mr. Melchan before we move on with the public hearing? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to open the public hearing, and I'm going to just remind everyone before we start this public hearing, this one will be obviously regarding the zoning request. You are allowed to come up and speak again, even if you spoke at the prior public hearing, but you are only allowed one time to speak in each public hearing. I'd also like to ask that each of you will respect the people that are at the podium speaking. Each of you deserve the right to come up and state your opinion. That's what we're here for tonight. And so please do not call out from your seats your opinion. Remember, when you're at the podium, you will be speaking to the Planning Commission. Address all your questions to us, and we will make notes of them and address them at the end of the public hearing. And again, 3 minutes for each person that speaks. We do allow the applicants, and as I allowed the Jernigan family longer than the 3 minutes, the applicants do have longer than the 3 minutes to speak. But each person coming up for the public hearing, you'll have 3 minutes. And so appreciate you trying to stick as close to that as you can so that everybody gets the chance to get back up and speak again. So with that, we'll open this public hearing and ask anybody to come forward that would like to speak.
I'm Don Bolton. I live at 2003 Tulip Hill Drive. Two of my many objections to this rezoning request are traffic and noise. As you know, or as you've been told many times, traffic is overwhelmingly increased since the Joe B. Jackson interchange and industrial zoning in the area. And this rezoning just adds to that burden. In the last planning meeting, Mr. Smotherman said he would do what he could and help us with the traffic issues and signals on Elam Road. And good to his word, he brought it up at the next council meeting, and Mr. Huddleston's answer was, it's too close to Rutherford per the city guidelines for a signal. Prior to that, as somebody had earlier said, it's always been, it's a county road. Well, now I think it is or will be shortly a city street. And in rebuttal to the too close to Rutherford Boulevard answer, there must be an exception to those city rules or guidelines, because there are many traffic signals all over the city that about equals that distance or less than that distance from South Rutherford to Elam. To name a few, Old Fort Parkway at Cason Lane to River Rock Road is a mere 262 feet per Google. Sulphur Springs at Memorial and West Rutherford at Memorial is 404 feet. And West Lytle Street to West Main on Broad is about 528 feet. Therefore, I would request that Mr. Smotherman address that issue again with Mr. Huddleston or at the city council meeting when it's brought up and rezoning and annexation goes before it. The second thing on noise. I understand that the applicant will manufacture small buildings on this site. I have the Murfreesboro Noise Control Ordinance that states in part, to minimize the exposure of citizens to the potential negative effects of excessive noise on the community, and a summary of the restrictions and types of activities and times. My question, does the same noise control apply to this property as it does to any other construction activities within the city regarding hours and maximum sound levels. If my neighbors have future noise complaints, I would suggest they follow the city's directions, again, that says noise complaints may be reported to the Murfreesboro Police Department non-emergency number at 615-893-1311. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Robert P. I live at 4047 Bivens Hill Road in Reedville. I have some friends that contacted me on this issue, and I just had a few things to say. First, I appreciate your jobs. I've been on the county's planning commission for a number of years, and it's never easy balancing a homeowner's rights to do with their property as they wish and the people that are impacted. So I appreciate the tough job that you have. The main thing that I wanted to stress in getting up here is I'd like for you to try as much as possible to accommodate these residences, to reduce the noise, to reduce the traffic problems. I don't know, I haven't looked at the roads here. You know, possible bans on industrial traffic going in and out of that site on maybe parts of their egress, maybe a spur over to one of the other major roads that'll get around the traffic signal problem. But the thing that I want to stress is I don't think any of you live in that neighborhood, and I don't think any of the city councilmen or council people live in this neighborhood. So, you know, their representation depends on y'all. But if your home was in this neighborhood, I think you'd like the same considerations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. P.
Hi, I'm Diane Parker, 2101 Wimbledon Drive. My grandfather was Judge John D. Wiseman. Many of you may have known or heard of the name. He was a circuit court judge for many years. My dad grew up in Murfreesboro. I've lived here since 1978. They bought the property off of Wimbledon Drive. It, at that time, was very quiet. Actually, we were rural. And I remember complaining as a high school and college kid that we couldn't get cable. And then finally cable came out, and my dad said, no, I don't want cable. Well, that's all changed. I know that this is going to pass, and this is going to go through. I just really hope that you take into consideration everything you've heard about this neighborhood, about preserving the sanctity of this neighborhood. How are you going to buffer? The buffer that's being allotted right now is not enough. 60 feet, berm, 20 foot. It is not acceptable. I've been behind Swan's Cosmetics and the apartments behind there. You can see right through to the apartments. We have a neighbor that I don't know if she's here, but she can hear the truck noise from that factory, and she hears it, she sees it. So I really hope that you take into consideration preserving our neighborhood. In regard to, I asked a question about why is this being rushed through? And I refer you to go back to the Planning Commission meeting, March 6th video, where it is stated that they needed to hurry this through, and I don't remember who it was that was talking, but he stated we need to hurry this through. This is a good opportunity for the city. So I will ask again that question, why is this being rushed through? And I will ask a question again about the heavy industrial zoning, and why did you not go with the recommendation of the city planner and the assistant planner for planned industrial development? Apparently, Mr. Berryman is bringing several companies into this neighborhood. I don't think he's going to utilize all of the 300 acres. And that, I guess that's why you don't have a plan. Well, that presents a problem for us because we don't know what's going to go behind our houses. Have any of you driven, you have driven the neighborhood, have you seen how close the houses are to the property lines? They're very close. One neighbor, it's going to surround her on 3 sides. Now, I beg, if you lived in this neighborhood, would you be approving this? I don't think so. I really don't. Like I said, I understand we can't stop the growth. We can't stop somebody from being able to sell their land, from being able to buy it, to develop it. That's not what I'm about. I'm just asking that this be preserved, that you listen to our concerns. You've talked about widening Elam Road. I don't know where you're going to widen it. I don't know if you've been down Elam, but there's 8 houses on Elam that already have no front yard. And there's, on the other side, there's nowhere to widen it. You know, when you do your master, the 2040 plan, it states on there Tulip Hill is going to be connected from South Rutherford to go to Elam, and then it goes back over to Manchester Highway. Well, I can already see what's going to happen. The trucks from this industrial park are going to use South Rutherford to get out. Instead of going left to go to Church Street, they're going to go right on South Rutherford. They're going to take a right on Tulip Hill. They're going to take a right on Elam, and they're going to go Joe B. Jackson to get out. I sent you all a picture of a truck that was blocking South Church Street today by email. That happens every day. Just the other day, there was a truck that SUV rammed underneath the truck, and I don't know if somebody was killed or not, but it looked like it was pretty bad. But that every day there's wrecks on South Church. This is just, this is not the right area for a heavy industrial park. I'm in transportation. I'm in industry parks all the time. This is just not the right area, but if it's going to pass, we need concessions. We need lights at Elam Road now. You can't get out. You can't. Joe B., Manchester Highway, it's bottlenecked. So before you start building and developing and opening up businesses, please do the road infrastructure first. Please, somebody see about getting lights at the corner of Manchester Highway and Elam and at the corner of Joe B. and Elam. We've asked for that for years. Please preserve our way of life, our neighborhood. Give us more of a buffer.
Thank you.
Okay? Thank you.
Again, my name is Bruce White. I live at 1819 Lee Lane. As far as this annexation here and the zoning, I'm probably going to be affected the most since my house is 40 foot within the property line of this. I got some drawings that I can just pass out. Is that okay? I didn't realize how many people here, so I have 6, so we can share a little bit. As you can see, if you you're coming down Lee Lane, and the property that Mr. Jernigan has right here and the other people, and by no means is anyone opposed to Mr. Jernigan and them trying to sell their land. We're just opposed to the use that's coming in there. The property line is actually 10 feet from my driveway. I have a 28 by 34 foot garage, and the property line is 5 feet from the garage. The property line in question is 40 feet from my house. So if this was to pass, and it most likely will, I mean, I'm being realistic. I don't want to, I'm not one to stand in the way of growth, but this type of growth we just don't need in this area. It should just stay zoned like it is. But as you can see, I'm requesting that they be a 100-foot setback, not 60 foot. And that would be from Lee Lane northward into the property, and from the property line that separates 1819 and the Jernigan property is to the west side of me, 100 foot there also. And I am requesting that they be a 25 foot, and this is a wall, a concrete wall, because I see it go up around a lot of different places, and this will reduce the noise and the light pollution that is definitely coming through there when it gets developed. So what I would request is you know, a standard height, 10-foot, 12-foot wall, and I want a 25-foot evergreen buffer in front of that wall so that it kind of blends in and you kind of makes things disappear back in there. And in order to kind of maintain the way the property looks now, is I would request that whoever, you know, the occupants of this property is going to be, that they would erect a 4-board styled farm ranch fence, maybe 5 foot from the property line down Lee Lane and to the back end of the property that is at 1819 Lee Lane. I came here 30 years ago, you know, and I looked for a long time and saved money for those 30 years to be able to purchase a piece of property that I have. And I'm really happy with the piece of property. And I'm not going to be real happy if it goes to heavy industrial. You know, it's going to affect my happiness at the property. It's already got me. I've done probably $150,000 worth of improvements on the property since I've been there for a year, and to do that, it kind of disheartens me and to make me think, well, I might need to just stop, you know, and not continue improving it because of this. It's going to be a hardship on me. So I would request that y'all really consider these setbacks. And that's not just for me, that's for everybody. My neighbors across the street. I mean, this is going to be right in their front door also. It's going to reduce the noise from going up to Crossfield Court or Cross Court. And it'll knock some of the noise off from Tulip Hill. The light, the noise, plus we don't know what kind of business is coming in there. So we don't know what the smells, the air pollution is going to be. I know the train track is going to be a lot of clanging and stuff going on in there, so it would kind of reduce some of that. And like previous people have said, that we hear a lot of noise already from the interstate and from the other industries over there clanging all night long. So we're just asking for a little relief from that. Thank you very much for your time and your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Wright.
Good evening again. My name is Melinda Brown. I live at 2004 Crossfield Drive. There are three main concerns that I think all of us are going to continue to reiterate. We're just going to echo a lot of each other's sentiments, but there are certain things that I would like to specifically address or request clarification. We have heard that the additional roadmap is going to include a spur of Lee Lane, that it's going to go all the way to Rutherford. There's also some statements that Tulip Hill is going to spur back over to Rutherford. These are two very, very narrow, very small dead-end roads right now, and we're talking about those then connecting back up to Rutherford. That, yeah, absolutely, it's going to relieve some of the pressure from the ends of Elam Road trying to get there. But what is it going to do to the rest of us? It's going to go right through our neighborhood. We're going to have people up and down all night long. The other problems that we're having is Lee Lane is part of the property that we're talking about in zoning this. And if the property is sold and is zoned heavy industrial, and they're talking about putting a lovely road all the way back through to the back of their property, they're going to hook it up to Lee Lane. It only makes sense, especially if it's already going to be expanded and whatnot, widened and hooked up back to Elam Road. They're talking about one point of access. Well, that might be great for right now, but one point of access means that they are coming out all of this over 300 acres of land that they're talking about developing into multiple types of buildings and having all these little buildings that, you know, their industry is, that they're taking about these little storage sheds and whatnot. Some of those are very large and going to be oversized loads because we've seen them up and down the highway all the time. But some of those are going to need to, you know, go through the neighborhoods. If it hooks up to Lee Lane, they're going to be going through our neighborhood, and those streets, I drive a Ford F-150, and if somebody else in a truck is coming by, we have to get way over on the edge of the road because we can't pass each other. You know, usually we kind of pull over and stop and wait for the other one to go because our roads are that narrow. Elam Road is barely 2 lanes, and it has no shoulder. It is a ditch on the side. There's a lot of concerns that we would have of any kind of wide loads going through there. That is going to have to be expanded. There's just no way around it. So if we're talking about that being on the 2040 plan, that's 21 years from now. And I know that we talked about some of the more important improvements that are coming up in 5 years, but I didn't hear anyone say that Lee Lane was on that list. I heard that we were looking at that saying, well, it really wasn't anticipated that this was going to happen. This is a dead-end road. But if we hook it up to this other road through this industrial park, it's not going to be a dead-end road. But if they're talking about a genuine single site exit, the only exit that they're talking about is Rutherford Boulevard, and that is South Rutherford, right after the bridge, close to Church Street. How are they going to get on the interstate? We've all been to Church Street and Rutherford, and we have sat there and sat there and sat there. You can't get down Church Street, you can't turn on Rutherford because people are sitting in that intersection. They had to take out this stoplight because people sit in that intersection. So the traffic is a major concern, and I have not yet heard any solutions that are helping us to understand what's going on. The other is, of course, the noise. Noise pollution is going to severely impact our enjoyment of our property. And when people are not able to enjoy the property that they have lived in, that's called a nuisance. And there's a lot of lawsuits that go on when you're talking about pollution of noise, light, and anything that's interfering with your enjoyment of your own property. Of course, that does have to be pretty significant, but when you're talking heavy industrial backing up to a residential area, there's a reason why that's a problem. So certainly we would like to see more consideration for
Ms.
that.
Brown, wrap it up. Thank you.
Finally, the area does have a lot of wetland. Lytle Creek runs through here. We haven't heard anything about what's going to happen with pollution. We don't know what chemicals are going to be used, what resources are going to be. We don't have any idea. We don't even have a plan to know what they're going to do with it. But there is a lot of wetland. That area in the rainfall, it does stay wet for days.
Thank you.
So we'd like to hear what's going on with that.
Thank you. Next.
Good evening, Joanne Plow, 2232 Elam Road. In the article that appeared in the Daily News Journal, it says that Mr. Berryman has initial support. Well, not from this neighborhood, he does not. the council members say it will attract high-paying jobs. Well, I think that was the same verbiage that was probably used when Amazon came. I don't believe anyone here could live on $10 to $15 an hour. I've also come to light that there's a General Electric building that has been unused for many years, zoned heavy industrial, also has a spur to the railroad. So why this property? To quote someone, I believe it's not fair for a small group of landowners to control land use around them. Adding that the owners of the property in question and those with expertise in land planning should make those decisions. We are homeowners, we are landowners, we pay taxes. We enjoy our properties. Would any of you feel the same way if someone said that about you? Donald Anthony had asked about going for the lesser zoning. There is, I do not know if it's complete, but general, medium, industrial that has been put forth between the board and the city council. A question was asked of Jeff Reed at the city council in regards to the lesser invasive zoning instead of going right for heavy industrial. The attorney, Jeff Reed, stated that does not work for him and his client. I think the main reason for that statement was that it did not support outdoor storage. I had made suggestions to pretty much every one of the city council that I've spoken to directly about adding an addendum. I was told it would open a can of worms. I'm sorry, Murfreesboro, you're opening a gallon of worms by going right for the gusto at heavy industrial. I was also told that the plats, if the applicant does not live up to that, the city can go after them. That any covenants, I'm getting nervous, but anyway, that the neighborhood would have to fight. I was then told that the applicant is tying those covenants into plats. I don't know if that's actually happening. Now he wants to acquire another 85 acres. I agree. It's private property. They have a right to sell it. Someone has a right to purchase it. What you don't have a right to is to destroy the neighborhood that's already there. You've already voted to annex it. I don't doubt that you won't vote for this too, but we're begging you at least go for the lesser of the invasive zoning. And actually, my opinion is a 200 feet 200 feet between the property lines. Initially, they wanted 45, and when they went to 60, someone on the city council, well, if you go to 60, I'll pass it. Are you kidding? My house is longer than that. I mean, it's, and the people that do bump up against this property, think of their quality of life. It's in your own guidelines. It is noise. One other last thing I wanted to bring up. In Nashville, there was an area called the Nations. And the Nations, there was industrial there and they were bringing housing. It was a long-term plan. And from what I gather, the citizens actually had a say. They had a say in noise restriction, the hours. They had a say in the hours that tractor trailers can go through their neighborhoods. They had definite plans on widening the streets, adding bike lanes. They actually had a plan and it's actually working. So if Nashville can do it, why can't Murfreesboro? And why does the decision on what to do with the traffic and the roads have to coincide with this Rutherford Industrial Park? Okay, fine. But we live there and we have no idea what you're putting there. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I appreciate your time.
Thank you. have been extremely generous in the first few speakers that have been up there regarding the 3-minute limit, so please try to keep it to 3 minutes. We've got a lot more people that would like to speak.
Christopher Brown, 2004, Crossfield Drive, Department of Redundancy Department. Yeah, let me appeal to a different sense here.
Thank you.
All right. It's not an issue of change. It's not an issue of necessarily traffic. That's a big concern. But hey, we've got traffic over there regardless. Okay. Big issue. Lee Lane and Tulip Hill are pretty much going to be the outlets that they're going to want to use to get to Elam Road. I can see Rutherford being like an input or an output, Elam Road being the opposite, Lee Lane or Tulip Hill being the throughput one way or another for whichever way they go. So that's my personal concern. All right. I think there's better ways to handle that than to disrupt a neighborhood in such a way. Also, upon looking at it and looking at the location of this, seems to me that the area would be better served if this were not zoned heavy industrial, but were considered maybe medium to light industrial at most, if, as Mr. Huddleston says, this is mostly going to be an office park. If that were so, it wouldn't need the industrial tag to begin with. But commercial, come on, it's a busy, massive intersection in Murfreesboro. Telling me they can't possibly find a buyer in commercial? Telling me the city would probably make more money, I think, over time with commercial. Just throwing ideas out there. I think outside the box. That's why my wife keeps me around. So, as it pertains to the current land owners, no one's interested in blocking someone selling their land. It's not a matter of whether or not you sell your land, it's who you sell it to, especially in relation to those who have to put up with it, because they certainly don't. We do. We have to deal with this. So, just a little outside the box there, a little food for thought. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Good evening, Chairman Jones, members of the Planning Commission staff. I'm Brick Murphy. I live at 1011 Glasgow here in Murfreesboro. My family, the Murphy family, through the Mary Kay Murphy Family Partnership, owns a tract of property to the north. My family's owned that property right at 100 years now. It was my great-grandfather's. We sold the tracts where Husky Lumber and Truss and where West Rock is, both industrial developments that are heavy industrial. I don't represent Mr. Berryman, but I've had the opportunity to know him. He runs a good business, a growing business, and he needs the opportunity to be able to keep it here in Murfreesboro and in our county. This is a rare opportunity to do that. At one point, we had a contract to sell to Mr. Berryman a portion of our property, and that fell through due to rail access. Now, CSX has given him the opportunity to have a spur on the property in question, and it's a rare opportunity, and it needs to be seized while it's available. My family is in support of the application and would ask that you vote in favor of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy.
My name is Eric Plow. I live at 2232 Elam Road. And with respect to Mr. Jernigan and with you, sir, again, I agree that any citizen has the right to own and sell their property. Nobody's denying that, and myself and most of the people that I know are definitely not anti-industry. We're simply trying to dial this back a little bit so that it's less invasive to us, to our homes. And a lot of people have made, this sort of have asked the question, yet I haven't heard a single answer from anybody. If this was going in your backyard, would you approve it? Well, that's not a callous or easily asked question. We'd actually like answers from you because we don't think you would. This is our home. It's already been, the city council has already admitted that this project going through will reduce the value of our homes. They said it. It was at the meeting. I believe that this going through under heavy industrial, darn, I lost my train of thought. This going in under heavy industrial is just, it's too much. I mean, we can take a step back. I mean, there's no reason that you can't use a lower designation and add amendments to appease the new landowner. You know, we're willing to make those concessions, but heavy industrial is just, it's just too much. You're gonna hurt our properties, you're gonna hurt all of our homes. Values, the traffic, we're just begging you, listen to what we're saying, you know. Don't put this through. Heavy industrial is, this is just not the right place for it.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Mike Knowles, Smyrna, Tennessee, 359 Pleasant Run Road. And Mr. Smotherman, and see, you've got to run real quick, but I do respect everything you do for this community. Every landowner has the right to sell their land. Every city has a right to annex what property if a landowner says, I want to be annexed. That's what the state law says, and that's what y'all reiterated earlier. So that's fine and fair and good. But what's the equation that I see in all this, because I don't live with by these neighbors. See it from a different perspective. I see that the process is broke because the county people are not represented by the city folk that's in front of us. Basically, you just annexed a property that is now becoming city or will become city when it goes to the city commissioners. And they will annex that property to city, and the owner of that property will become city, and the county people be darned, basically. They will not have any say. You're listening to these people, you're giving them good respect, but in the end, you really don't care because there's not a connection between, that I see, between the county and the city right now that's representing these people. They're here screaming. They are saying, help me. And I don't see anyone that is in power that helps them. And when you talk about heavy industrial, it's coming. CSX is doing a spur. CSX has the money, and they're not going to have a spur without the property being heavy industrial. That's a given. So that's happening. There's no way around that. CSX is not putting that money in there to have light industrial. And that's just going to be a fact. So, you know, again, I see it a part of this whole process just being broke because there isn't a connection. These people aren't being represented, and they won't. Because I guarantee you there'll be a unanimous decision saying yes, just like there was for the annexation, because the decision's made from this committee, because that's the recommendation that they've seen. That's my opinion. And I think there needs to be a look at from the city planning commission to say, how do we deal with when we annex property, steal it from the county through a process? Stealing is a harsh word, so we'll take that back. But take it from the county without having allowing the people to have any say about it, because they don't. I don't see how they have a say. They can voice it here, it can go in the paper, it can be heard, but it's really not a voice, in my opinion. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Knowles.
Hi, my name's Lisa Holland, and I live at 1819 Lee Lane. And I just want to back up everything that Mr. White said. I come home every day from work, and it was our dream to find somewhere in the country to come home and relax after hard days at work. Anybody has a right to sell their property. We're not saying that, and they shouldn't be made guilty for who they sell it to. But all we're asking is that you can somehow keep that noise down, like the wall that he is talking about, keep the traffic from coming back in there, because we know it's going to happen. You know, we're just asking that you please keep in mind that try to preserve some of that beauty that's out there. I mean, when you come home and you see that 85 acres and all the cows are out there, and at night the lightning bugs are out there, it's beautiful. And, I mean, we just got in there, and to see that, now to think all of our hard work is wasted, or Miss Nunley enjoys it, and all the other neighbors that are there enjoy it. I mean, if there could just be some kind of barrier that blocks that off, keep that 300 acres of high industrial somewhere, heavy industrial somewhere else over there, so that, you know, we don't have to see all that. I mean, I just want to put my 2 cents in. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Members of the Planning Commission, my name is John Harney. I am here on behalf of Mr. Brian Berryman, the applicant, and also the Jernigan family. I live at 6748 West Gum Road, actually right next to I-24 on the opposite side of I-24, about 3 or 4 more miles down from this property we're talking about. I've heard the reoccurring comments from the people speaking tonight, and a lot of them are legitimate concerns. Traffic, number 1, noise, number 2, and light pollution. Reoccurringly, several people have mentioned. I'll pass this out, but we petitioned the county road superintendent, Greg Brooks, back before we actually came the first time to the Planning Commission, if they would and did have the right to post Lee Lane to no rough traffic. I've got an email response from Mr. Brooks that I'll pass around, but basically acknowledges that the county will post both ends of Lee Lane to no truck traffic. We have never intended for this development to throw heavy truck traffic onto Lee Lane. I've heard it mentioned attaching to Tulip Hill. This property doesn't even have access to Tulip Hill Drive, but that's not the intention. The intention is the outlet to be on Rutherford Boulevard. Actually, we have looked at the same location of where FedEx had proposed a traffic light entry into the property when they were looking at the Hoover property before. So that's our intention. I think Mr. Huddleston has mentioned, but as this property develops over time, Mr. Berryman wants to create a campus of his corporate headquarters and a lot of ancillary businesses that he has, some that he has in a lot of other locations around the country. So our understanding is that property develops and traffic is created by those businesses, then the city's got the right to have us, or in conjunction with them, do traffic studies so that we deal with the extra traffic that we're creating, be it wherever, be it at Church Street and Rutherford Boulevard, be it at Rutherford Boulevard, Manchester Highway, wherever. We know that's part of the site plan approval process, and we understand that, and will comply with that. Someone mentioned noise. There is a noise ordinance in the city of Murfreesboro, and Mr. Berryman and anybody else that comes to that property and builds a building has to comply with the city noise ordinance. I don't really have much knowledge about the county noise ordinance, if there is one, or how in depth, but I do have from developing. I was heavily involved in the Joby Jackson corridor development up there, and that's controlled by the city. Light pollution is the same. It's my understanding we can have maybe Mr. Holston, no more than 1 lumen at the property lines, which is great design. No longer are you throwing floodlights onto somebody else's property. You direct light onto the property that you're trying to light up for security purposes or whatever. Again, we will have to comply with the light pollution ordinance as site plans come in and things get developed. Mr. Berryman intends to be a large owner in a large portion of this, spend a considerable amount of money building corporate headquarters and a lot of his accessory businesses. He doesn't want to do anything that damages his investment in the campus he's going to create, and hopefully in the process can bring a lot of additional jobs to Rutherford County. We'll be here, Mr. Reed and I are here to certainly answer any other questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harney. Anybody else like to come forward to speak? Close the public hearing. Ms. Green, anything you heard you want? Thank you. To address in relation to any of these questions before we.
If you wanted to accept the change presented by Mr. Mulchin, I would ask that you be specific about that, including the 40-foot strip to not be zoned to heavy industrial or whatever you choose. The type E buffer will be required per zoning ordinance, but that may be something you want to be specific about if you decide to move forward with this application. I think there were some specific questions about, of course, the signal and it not meeting our standards for the intersections being signalized. I think Mr. Huddleston can speak to that again if you believe it wasn't clear earlier. The request is to zone the property to HI, which is a bulk zoning district. So it's not like a plan development where Planning Commission puts specific conditions on the zoning. You can decide not to zone it HI or to recommend some other type of zoning, but there aren't specific conditions that you place on the property because it is a bulk zone request. I think the three things are traffic, noise, and light pollution. If there's anything specific to those that you'd like me to answer, I'd be glad to answer those questions.
Can you just talk a little bit, or maybe Mr. Ives, regarding explaining the differences between restrictive covenants versus having the restrictions on the plat, and explaining the difference and why we would ask for one versus the other?
You may want Mr. Anthony to answer that.
Mr. Anthony, we'd love for you to answer that, please.
Yes. So restrictive, I don't know if this is actually on, and I apologize. Every time I use this, I'm sort of a dummy when it comes to technology, but hopefully I'll get picked up one way or the other. Restrictive covenants are essentially agreements that are made among property owners, and they are enforceable by property owners. So if you have a single property owner and he puts restrictive covenants on a deed, it's up to him to enforce his own covenants. The city's not a party to those. In this particular case, because of the sensitivity of the site, because we knew what the neighbors' concerns were, we worked up a recommendation for a conditional zoning. It's, as I have said 100 times, it's not something I ever want to get into. It's not a thing that we deal with on a regular basis, but on this specific project, it seemed warranted. And so on this project, we have recommended a conditional zoning, conditional upon the applicant recording a plat that would list out all of these uses that would be restricted. That allows the city to be a signatory onto the restriction. Restrictive covenants on a deed, we're not a signatory. Restrictions on a plat, we are. Now, after tonight, forget that we ever had this discussion because I'm never going to bring it back to you again.
And just to be specific, the original, the 233 acres, that's where we're talking about, and so we would have the option to ask for the same thing on this particular.
Correct, and Margaret Ann's staff report does list out all of those uses that we would want placed on the plat and not to be excluded from use on this property.
Thank you for explaining that. What other questions, comments from the Planning Commission?
I know there was a comment made that we were stealing from the county.
He took that back, though.
Oh, yeah, and he took it back. But trust me, this property will still be in Rutherford County no matter what happens here tonight. It's not going anywhere. It's not going anywhere. And they'll pay county taxes as well as city taxes if this does pass. But the comment was asked concerning the intersection light at Elam Road and Manchester Road, our highway. It's not going to benefit anything to put a signalized intersection light there if traffic is backed up from Rutherford Boulevard beyond the intersection, because when the light turns green for you to get off Elam Road, there's no place to go because the road's full. So it has to be located further back up the road to allow you the opportunity to get off on Manchester Highway and come into town. So that's the reason that it really doesn't make a whole lot of sense to address the issue where it currently exists. There'll have to be the road bent off earlier somewhere on Elam Road to get it over to Manchester Highway, far enough back from the intersection that when you do get a green light, you'll be able to pull out onto the highway. So that's the reason that there's resistance to saying we need to do it right there at that spot or that close to that intersection, because making an exception doesn't solve the problem. Mr. White, I hear your concern about the wall that you're requesting. I don't have any idea what a wall would cost. I'm not even sure I want to say build that wall, but yeah. They say they want to put my name on that wall because I requested that. But at this point, I think it would be more advantageous to us to have a good buffer between you and there. The buffer would be generally distance, but I know they haven't said that they want to build a berm, but and I've talked to Matt Taylor with SEC about the project of what it would cost, because it's easy to say build something, but cost is always a factor. And you have to be realistic with what you request. And in talking to Matt Taylor, it's my understanding that a berm around at least the Jernigan property that would affect you and Lee Lane and some of the other residential properties, that would run anyway maybe from $1 million to $1.3 million for a 6-foot berm with vegetation on it. And I would like for them to commit to that. I would like for them to say, we will build you a 6-foot berm with 6-foot evergreens on top of it, because that will benefit you. It would benefit you today if that were there, because if it were there today, you would have less noise on your property, because when I'm listening to the property from in front of Mrs. Neely's house, Nunley, clearly that sound is coming straight across that field, and the only thing stopping it now is the fact that it's summertime and we've got green vegetation there. I'm sure it would only be louder in the wintertime when that's cleared off. So we need something that's evergreen there, that's going to continuously protect you winter, summer, spring, and fall. And so the berm, I think, is reasonable. I think it's a reasonable request to make. I don't know that they'll agree to it, but I hope they would. In my opinion, they almost need to. And the concern about Lee Lane, I don't think a sign is adequate. I want us to put a gate at the end of Lee Lane where this property begins that is for emergency access only. And I don't think any of you would complain if a fire truck came down the road because there's a fire over there, or if there's been an accident on that property and they can't get to it from Rutherford Boulevard. There would need to be access for emergency use. And I think that's a fair request to ask for a Yelp gate there, so that you know that there's nobody who's going to try and come through there with a truck or trying to come through there for private use. That eliminates that concern for you. And so I think those are things that are legitimate requests. I would like to hear what the developers feel about that, and if that's even a potential. If it is, it would certainly help their case, I think. If it's not an option, then I think you guys have a really, really good case, is to say it's a little bit too intrusive on you.
Mr. White.
Mr. Harney, would you like to address that?
I think what we would be willing to do is install berm with landscaping at the time that a site plan comes forth that gets to that area. And the reason I'm saying that, we've been developing business a long time and have built a lot of berms with landscaping on them. The idea of a berm is good in one respect, because it raises the vegetation, but at the same time it sheds water faster than flat land. So if you build a berm and install vegetation without a complete irrigation system on it, it's probably due for failure. I think Mr. Berryman would be willing to build that berm at what time he gets back to the Jernigan property and a site plan comes in that actually touches those property lines. So it could be built as part of the site plan approval with a berm that's properly irrigated.
Is that Mr. Berryman?
Mr. Berryman.
Is that he? I have no idea. We refer to him regularly, and I have no idea who we're even talking about. I've never met him. Is that Mr. Berryman there?
He's asking if he's here.
Is he here?
No.
Oh,
no,
he's not here. Okay.
But I think that condition we would agree to, that at the time a site plan comes in, that gets to that buffer area on the Jernigan property, that a 6-foot high
That's right,
berm.
because I don't want you to plant something that's going to die. It's
Well,
got to have an irrigation system.
Yeah. And secondly, we have no opposition to a Yelp gate at the end of Lee Lane for emergency purposes. Again, like I stated before, we have no intention of turning truck traffic onto Lee Lane, and understand the county condition of that road does not need to take it. But in case of an accident out on Rutherford Boulevard at that intersection, I think we have to have a way to bring emergency access in. So a Yelp gate is fine with us if that's the opinion of the Planning Commission.
And again, that would be at the time.
At the time when a road system actually gets back to
in that
it.
area.
And we have no intentions of using this as a construction access point either, because it's going to develop from Rutherford Boulevard back, correct?
Construction will come in off of Rutherford Boulevard. The spine road that we've talked about to develop the property will progress from Rutherford Boulevard, and we really can't tell you how long before a road system will actually get back to Lee Lane. But
On a thing.
Certainly install that. Right now, it's just access to basically the farm property.
Okay. You've answered my questions. Thank you.
Okay,
Can I ask
thank you.
Mr. Harney one more question while he's up there, and then I'll come back to you, Mr. Smotherman, is that okay?
Yeah.
Just wanted you to address, there was a reference to wetlands on the property, and how or what would be the plans for addressing any wetlands on the property?
Well, as the city requires in the state of Tennessee, TDEC, Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation, as construction plans, site plans, and ultimately excavation grading plans are asked for approval, there is a requirement that the property be assessed as to existing wetlands, and that determination has to be made that tells you what you can develop or can't develop and have to mitigate. So as site plans come in and development grading plans come in, that's part of the process that we have to go through approval-wise with TDEC, just along with the necessary plans that we have to deal with the city of Murfreesboro. So that assessment would be made as the plans come in.
Okay.
And will have to be dealt with at that time.
Thank you. Thank you.
And the last thing I was going to say is I'm appreciative of Mr. Alan McAdoo, County Commissioner, and Commissioner Robert P., who were with us tonight to listen to this, and obviously you're concerned about your constituents, and thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Smotherman.
I've got a handful of things just to address some of the questions too that I think already have not been addressed, but a general comment related to the gentleman that commented between the connection between the county and the city and the overall concern for us, for county residents. You know, I think one of the things we did earlier tonight in basically working with the agreement with the county to put some resources on the west side of town in a land lease form from the standpoint of people being able to get renewed tags and things like that. I think that shows a partnership with the county, because obviously that's city property that we're trying to reach out and make sure those services are good. I can tell you from my standpoint, the people, you all that are here are not actually in the city residents, but it matters that you're here. You're a part of the community, our community as a larger whole, and I think sometimes it gets difficult that, if we feel like we don't get the answer that we want in a certain respect, then we're not listening. Well, we are listening, and that's part of what this process is here for. So I can tell you that I think we did show tonight, we do understand, we are listening, and we are trying to work with the county. So I didn't want to miss that opportunity to address that. Another thing, we talked about the rail spur availability, and there's some people that commented on that. Can we talk back about opportunities for other rail spurs in the city of Murfreesboro? Just to reiterate, you know, are there 5 of those sites that we're choosing from, or are there 0 of those sites and this one was created? Who'd like to talk about that?
Sam may want to come up. I know of one that exists, and that is the GE site that was mentioned, and it has very significant issues of its own.
Right.
There was a facility plan there that we simply were not able to work with and reach agreement on. I am not aware of any others that have readily available rail spurs. Are you? No. No.
So, I mean, that, and I was not aware of the GE site, so that's good. That's for my mental map, but I do know the issues with that site because we've talked about that with the other applicants. So I think that's healthy for this conversation. The other piece, obviously part of this, not this request, but the previous request on the Berryman property have already gone through City Council and passed a first reading, right?
First reading.
And so on that, when we were talking about the buffer there, the original buffer was RS-15, which was a 20-foot buffer, right? Help me work through this math.
The 20-foot buffer is required regardless. The RS-15 was an additional.
So what was that additional buffer?
It ended up being 40 feet.
So we've got 40 feet on the, that's passed a first reading on the City Council, but we're talking about 60 feet for this proposal. So those are different.
I believe at City Council it was originally going to be a 25-foot strip of RS-15 and then the 20-foot buffer on top of that. The City Council modified that to a 40-foot strip of RS-15 with a 20-foot buffer. So what they're looking to do is equal to what was approved on first reading at City Council
So
last
this
month.
does match. That was my other question, just to make sure.
Yes.
Okay, all right, because it didn't make sense for it not to match, but thanks.
Can I say very quickly, if anyone makes a motion this evening to approve this, please be sure to add in your recommendation the 40-foot RS-15 strip, because that is not shown. It was not part of the initial request. It's been modified.
Right, okay. Also, Ms. Plow mentioned, and the email that she read was my email, so that was in the paper. So, but thanks for trying to look out for me in the City Council meeting. But we talked through the heavy industrial zoning, and I think it came through council that general industrial zoning, because we worked through that piece. And I think one of the questions Ms. Plow had was why we couldn't do a lesser zoning. And just to kind of get that on record for this discussion, I think the issue with that was it would not allow lumber and steel in the general industrial zoning, if my memory's correct about that. Was that right?
That's correct. What has been presented thus far,
Okay.
Right.
So that comment that Mr. Reed made, just to kind of go back to address the concerns, was that it really wouldn't fit Mr. Berryman's use, the GI zoning. So that was part of that. The other issue she mentioned, or someone mentioned, was related to the bulk zoning. So we talked some about that, and obviously I know that is a concern anytime we talk about bulk zoning and the long-term use of not knowing exactly what that's going to look like. The other piece to that is, as we were talking about trying to maximize the opportunity for this site with the infrastructure that's in place, with the rail spur, not already having entitled property with zoning in place makes it very difficult for people to attract certain industry here if they do not already have that zoning in place. So, you know, from my perspective, I think that is a reasonable argument on one hand, but I do think there are concerns about bulk zoning. I'm pretty new at this. Does the staff have other concerns about bulk zoning that we have not talked about? Additional issues that come up with this? I hate to put you on the spot, but
if you want to speak up, go ahead.
Everybody's on the spot. So
we made a recommendation in March, and that was obviously what our professional recommendation, what we thought was the correct thing to do. I've been making recommendations to public bodies and boards for 20 years now, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of recommendations. sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. I'm not personally offended. It's all okay. I think, what we do when it appears something has momentum and is going to move forward, we make our recommendation. If it doesn't work, then we start working on how do we make the project better if it's going to move forward. And so that's what we've done here. That's what we've tried to do with the plat restrictions. I think that's what's going on with the adding the 40 feet of RS-15. Those are things that, we accept the reality of once something has momentum and is moving forward, that's what we want to do. So obviously we made our recommendation. This project has some legs, I think. I think that there's a desire to get these kinds of jobs and so forth that they're talking about into the community. So we've done everything in the world that I think that we can do to try to mitigate as much of the effect on the neighbors as possible. And quite honestly, I'm comfortable with what's been done.
Thank you. That's all I got.
I'd just like to make the comment, kind of echoing Mr. Martin's, one of his topics. I will agree with the statement that as a county resident, you don't have representation from a voting perspective for city councilmen inside the city. I will take heed to the point that we don't care. I didn't like that comment at all. There are very good friends of mine that are sitting in these seats today that I would hate to ever negatively impact by a decision that I made. However, I take this role on this planning commission very seriously and try to do the best job that I can do with the information that's given to me, that I feel like that would be for the betterment of the entire city, even though it may impact people around the particular property that's being rezoned. I do think that there are certain things that have happened here and concessions that have been made that hopefully will somewhat limit the negative impact that would be on the adjacent property owners. But the fact that we don't care is not true.
And just to add to that, of course, tonight we are dealing with surrounding property owners that are county, but the large majority of what we deal with up here, we're dealing with properties that are within the city, and everything that is surrounding it are city residents, and we listen to them every time they come forward and speak, and we don't always, do exactly what they would hope that we would do every time. So it is really no different. Those of us that sit on the Planning Commission are not elected, so we're not, you're not voting for us or wouldn't be voting for us if you lived in the city, other than we do always have 2 representatives from our city council that are on the Planning Commission, so of course they are elected, but the rest of us are appointed. But normally, we are the people sitting out there that we're listening to that do not like whatever we're talking about that particular night are city residents. So we're not treating you any differently than we do the city residents.
It would be nice, though, if more people came to the meeting and said you're doing a good job and
Yeah.
you got this right.
We like to hear from the people that love everything that's going on, but normally the people we hear from are the ones that don't. So that's okay.
Could you clarify my request of the 100 foot?
Do you all have any further comments or questions in regards to anything that we've discussed tonight? We're not taking further questions directly from the audience, or I do believe we addressed that.
there are no other questions, I'm willing to make a motion. If Margaret, if you'll help me, yeah, so say it so that I can say it right.
40-foot buffer, the additional 40-foot buffer.
So what the applicant has asked you to consider is to zone the property to heavy industrial, yet, but exclude a 40-foot wide strip along its eastern and portion of the northern property line, and have that come in with a zoning of RS-15. So it's just about the zoning.
So automatically, that gives us the 60-foot buffer.
During the site plan review, we will require that 20-foot buffer between the RS-15 and the heavy industrial zone, just by a matter of practice. When we review site plans, we review things such as site lighting, buffers. They're asking for a 40-foot wide strip to be zoned RS-15.
Okay. Well, I'll make the motion to approve it as heavy industrial, with the exception of that RS-15 40-foot buffer.
Can we include Eddie's berm, and if they, because I think, John, they agreed to it?
That's not something that you can include in a heavy industrial consideration. They are offering that, and that's okay, but the Planning Commission cannot make that a condition of approval.
But they could include that when it makes it to the council. They could
They
include
certainly
that.
can. They're standing up here telling you they're going to do that. I guess they'll probably come back before you, and you'll remember if they don't follow through, but it cannot be a condition of your motion.
Nor the Yelp gate?
Nor the Yelp gate. Especially the city manager, the city engineer has a lot of authority over public roads, and so Planning Commission may make recommendations but not have the final say about things like that. Maybe if you both were on board, then we could explore that. That could be something that could be explored in the future, but at this time, it's not something that's appropriate with a bulk zone.
So then we're used to seeing that when we do have a plan.
If this were a planned development, those would be reasonable conditions that you have placed maybe on properties before. They can gate their property, but the public right-of-way is very specific, and the authority to regulate public right-of-way is very specific to the city engineer.
Thank you.
All right, so I think we got the motion then. Is there a second?
Second.
And any further discussion? We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? The motion does pass as read. Thank you all for coming tonight. We appreciate your input. Get out.
Staff reports.
So our next item of business is our staff reports and other business. So we'll continue our meeting. If you all can continue your discussions outside, we appreciate it. First item we have under staff reports and other business is a zoning application for We have a zoning application for 2,348 lots, approximately 920 acres, as shown on the accompanying map, to be rezoned city core overlay. Murfreesboro Planning Department is the applicant. Mr. Anthony.
Thank you very much. You'll remember that we brought to you an expansion of the City Core Overlay District with some new regulations back a few weeks ago, and you made a recommendation to the City Council. We have a public hearing scheduled for August, I believe, with the City Council. This is for the map amendment that would accompany that, so this would actually be to rezone the properties into that City Core Overlay. What we're asking you to do tonight is to set the public hearing. This is not the actual rezoning. This is to set the public hearing. This is a little unusual that we bring it to you at a night meeting, but we want to, because this, as you see in the caption, this affects 2,300 properties, we want to advertise it early. So to get the word out and for us to advertise, we need you to go ahead and set a public hearing. So I believe that the date we're asking for, Matthew, is July 10th. Am I right?
That's correct.
Thank you very much. July 10th.
July. So, you need a motion to set?
We schedule a public hearing for
July 10th.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? July 10th, public hearing in the CCO.
It's a big
Be exciting, be a big one. And I believe we do still have another item of other business. And Mr. Ives.
Yes, ma'am. I get to start the meeting and end the meeting.
All right.
I guess that's an honor, I'm not sure. The second two-page that I handed out at the start of the meeting regards an access way to our soon-to-be-open Salem Elementary School. When this first came up, actually the property was acquired about a year ago, there was some discussion with the, no, I can't say it, Southern Meadows subdivision, which is immediately to the north of our school property. There just happens to be a vacant lot adjacent to the school property. That lot has a TVA pole on it and is encumbered by a TVA easement, and so it's unbuildable, and it's owned by the HOA. There's been discussion about a trail or pathway across that lot so that kids, parents, other people, I guess, can walk to school or bike to school from that subdivision in a convenient manner. We are asking, again, as a mandatory referral, the probability is that we will acquire an easement over that property. If that's not possible, we'll just acquire the lot and make it essentially a part of the school lot. The city would build the path, and right now there's not a sidewalk across the front of that lot. There is in the rest of the subdivision, but since no one has built a house on that lot, there's not a sidewalk there. We would put that sidewalk in and then construct a pathway back to connect to the sidewalks, paths that are being constructed around the school. So we would like your approval for us to acquire either by title or an easement over that property so that we can proceed to that and hopefully have that ready by the time school starts.
It's like a very good thing to do. Keep them from walking all the way down to St. Andrews. That'll be great. Comments, questions, or a motion? So you would like a motion to approve either an
approve
easement and/or the purchase of this lot?
Right.
I move that we give the city the right to acquire an easement or purchase the lot in question.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
Sorry, that was late.
Got it. Unanimous. Okay, any other business tonight? Mr. Blomley and Ms. Green, any other business?
Not from me, thank you.
All right.
That's all I have.
All right, great. We stand adjourned.